My sister snorted when I walked into her wedding in a thrift dress. "Guess you never outgrew being the embarrassment," she said. But when her groom saw me, his expression said everything. I, a 27 female, showed up to my sister Brooke's 29 female wedding in a vintage thrifted dress. It wasn't the most traditional wedding attire, but I loved it. The moment I walked in, my sister snorted and said, "Guess you never outgrew being embarrassed." It hurt, but it wasn't exactly new coming from her. What happened next though? Well, let's just say her fiancé's reaction to me changed everything. I've always been the odd one out in my family. I wasn't the beautiful one, the popular one, the one with her life all planned out. That was my younger sister, Brooke. It's not like my parents intentionally showed favoritism, but it was hard to ignore the fact that everyone, including them, always seemed to be more impressed by her. She had it all: the looks, the social life, the perfect boyfriend, and now, she was about to get married. To a guy named Graham who was, well, everything she wanted. I, on the other hand, was still figuring things out. I'd moved back home after college, trying to find my footing. I didn't have a picture-perfect life. My job at the local art gallery was nothing glamorous, but it was something I enjoyed. And that's where I found my peace, doing something I loved, even if it wasn't the big dream everyone expected. But when Brooke announced her engagement, I felt that familiar pang of jealousy creeping in. It wasn't because I wanted her life, I didn't. But I'd always felt overlooked, even in my own family. The thought of her wedding, with everyone there fawning over her, made me anxious. I wanted to show up, yes, but not as the side character who always got the scraps of attention. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be more than the quirky sister who never quite fit in. I decided I'd wear something bold, something that would make a statement. Not to cause a scene, but to remind myself that I didn't have to blend into the background. I went to a thrift store and found a dress, deep purple, with lace detailing and a fitted waist. It wasn't the typical wedding guest dress, but it was me. And for once, I didn't care what anyone else thought. When the wedding day finally came, I thought I'd prepared myself. I knew I'd have to face Brooke and all her friends. I knew she'd probably make some comments, and I knew I'd get that familiar look of disappointment from our parents. But what I didn't expect was Graham's reaction. That part? I'll never forget. I arrived at the venue early, trying to slip in unnoticed, but that's not how weddings work. There was already a crowd of people milling about, catching up, having their photos taken, and exchanging pleasantries. I stood out like a sore thumb. It wasn't even the dress that made me feel it, it was the way people looked at me. I wasn't the type to blend into a crowd. And in that moment, I realized how much I hated being the person people whispered about. I tried to ignore it, tried to find a quiet corner to catch my breath. But then I saw her. Brooke, standing at the front with Graham. She was glowing, of course she was. She had everything she'd ever wanted. And she looked perfect. Too perfect. I felt my stomach churn. It wasn't that I didn't love her, I did. But at that moment, I wanted something for myself. I didn't want to be the person they all looked at and judged for wearing the wrong thing. I wanted to be someone they'd remember. As I walked into the reception hall, I could hear murmurs. A few people turned their heads. I could already tell they were whispering about my dress. I couldn't help it, I held my head high. No matter what, I wasn't going to shrink this time. I was going to stand tall. Brooke noticed me immediately. Of course, she did. Her eyes narrowed when she saw what I was wearing. I could see the judgment in her eyes before she even opened her mouth. "Guess you never outgrew being the embarrassment," she said, loud enough for the people around us to hear. It stung. I could feel my face flush, and I fought the urge to run out of the room. The words weren't new, they were familiar, like a punch to the gut that I'd been bracing for my entire life. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let her have this moment. Not today. Before I could say anything back, I noticed Graham. He was standing next to Brooke, and his gaze met mine. It wasn't an ordinary glance, it was different. There was a flicker in his eyes. Recognition. And then, something more. I wasn't sure what it was, but I could tell it wasn't just about being polite. Brooke didn't seem to notice the subtle shift in his expression. But I did. And for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. I stood there, trying to ignore the simmering tension between my sister and me. Brooke was making small talk with her friends, but I could feel her glare burning into the back of my neck. She was furious, and I couldn't blame her. I had just walked into her wedding and taken the spotlight without meaning to. But that wasn't my problem. I wasn't about to apologize for who I was anymore. As the night wore on, I stayed away from the main group. I wasn't trying to cause a scene, I just needed space. The more I tried to enjoy myself, the more I felt Brooke's eyes on me. I felt her watching, judging, criticizing. I could tell she was talking to people about me behind my back. And the worst part? It was always the same. I was the awkward, eccentric sister who didn't know how to fit in with her perfect little world. It wasn't until later in the evening when I saw Graham again. This time, he was standing near the bar, looking like he was trying to figure out what to do. I don't know why, but I walked over. Maybe it was because I felt an odd pull toward him, maybe because I was tired of feeling invisible in my own life. He looked surprised when I approached, but then his face softened. "Carmen," he said, his voice quieter now. "I didn't expect you to be here, let alone wearing that." I chuckled, despite myself. Yeah, I guess I'm not what people expect. There was a brief, almost uncomfortable silence. But then he spoke again, his voice low. "You look incredible," he said. In a way I didn't expect. His words threw me off. It wasn't the typical polite compliment you'd get at a wedding. There was something in the way he said it, something more than just a passing remark. He didn't look at me like he was just being nice. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I didn't know what to say. The whole thing felt surreal. But before I could respond, Brooke appeared beside us, her expression as sharp as ever. "What are you doing over here?" she demanded, a little too loud for my liking. I wasn't sure if it was the wine or the exhaustion from the night, but for the first time, I didn't care. I could feel the pressure building, and I wasn't about to let it slide. "I'm just talking," I said, meeting her gaze. "Is that a problem?" She looked like she was about to say something else, but Graham stepped in. "Brooke, we need to talk," he said, his voice firm. "In private." I watched them walk off together, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. It wasn't just me. There was something going on with Graham too, and I wasn't sure how to process it. But I knew one thing for sure, my sister wasn't the only one who was used to getting what she wanted. Things were changing, and I had no idea where this was going. The evening stretched on, and the reception seemed to drag. The music played, people danced, but I felt disconnected from it all. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something had shifted in the air, between Graham and me, between Brooke and me, and even between me and the people who were supposed to be family. My heart was heavy, and I wasn't sure how to carry it anymore. I hadn't seen Brooke or Graham since their conversation. It wasn't like I was actively searching for them, but I was aware of the tension lingering just under the surface. Every so often, I'd catch glimpses of Graham, talking with other guests, but his eyes always flickered in my direction before he looked away. I noticed that too, the small moments where our gazes would meet and linger, as if neither of us could quite look away. It was strange. I felt like I was walking around in a fog, trying to piece together what was happening, but I couldn't find the answers. Finally, I decided to step outside to get some air. The cool night breeze felt good against my skin. I walked to the back of the venue, away from the noise and chaos, just trying to collect my thoughts. As I stood there, I heard footsteps approaching. My first instinct was to turn and walk back inside, but then I saw who it was. Graham. He stopped a few feet away, looking unsure of what to do next. His eyes were locked on mine, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable," he said, finally breaking the silence. I wanted to say something. I think you should know. I raised an eyebrow. What is it? He shifted his weight, his gaze still lingering on me. That I'm sorry about how things are playing out. It's not fair to you. The way everything happened tonight, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I wasn't sure what he meant. What do you mean? I didn't expect things to go the way they did with Brooke and me, he said, his voice quiet now. Honestly, I thought I had everything figured out. But when I saw you, when you walked in, I don't know. It just changed everything for me. There was something in the way he said it, in the way his words hung in the air between us, that felt so raw, so real. It made me question everything. Was he just speaking out of guilt? Or was there something more? I didn't want to read too much into it. It felt like I was being set up for some kind of betrayal, not just of my sister, but of myself. Graham, you're engaged, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You can't just, I know, he interrupted, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't want to hurt her. I don't want to hurt you. He paused and let out a frustrated sigh. I'm confused. I'm not sure what's real anymore. I don't want to be with someone just because I'm supposed to. I want to be with someone who actually feels like they're the one. I swallowed, unsure of how to respond. What was he saying? Was this some kind of twisted form of confession? Was he trying to tell me that he wanted me, or was he simply caught up in the chaos of the evening? Either way, I knew this was a conversation I couldn't have. Not here. Not like this. You need to go back inside, Graham, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. This isn't the time or place for this. He seemed to hesitate, like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he nodded slowly, turning back toward the building. I'll be inside, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I'll be thinking about this. About you. With that, he disappeared back into the crowd, leaving me standing there, alone with the night. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Brooke never approached me again, and I couldn't bring myself to go back to the dance floor or mingle with the guests. I stayed by the edges, avoiding everyone, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. I watched as the reception wound down, people starting to say their goodbyes, and the atmosphere shifting from celebration to exhaustion. It wasn't until the very end that Brooke came up to me again. She was alone this time, her face pale, her eyes still holding that look of anger, but with something else now. Pain. What the heck was that, Carmen? She demanded, her voice sharp and low, as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. You had to make everything about you, didn't you? I was so tired of her words, of her accusations. I wasn't the one who had caused all this chaos. But I also knew she was hurting. It didn't make her actions right, but I understood it. You don't get it, I said, shaking my head. I didn't do this to hurt you. But you've spent your whole life acting like I'm just some side character. Like I'm not worth anyone's time or attention. I was just trying to be myself for once. Her expression faltered, but she quickly masked it with another sneer. You always do this, don't you? Try to make everything about you. You always want people to feel sorry for you. I closed my eyes briefly, fighting back tears. I don't want people to feel sorry for me, Brooke. I just want to be seen. I want to matter, too. There was a long silence between us. For the first time, I thought I might have gotten through to her. But just as quickly as it appeared, that vulnerability faded, and the cold, familiar mask returned. I don't need your sympathy, she said, her voice ice cold. You can have your little drama. But you're not going to take this from me. I'm marrying Graham. This is my day. Not yours. And just like that, she turned and walked away. I felt the familiar sting of being dismissed, but it didn't hurt the way it used to. In some strange way, I felt free. By the time the night was over, I was exhausted. I said my goodbyes, gave my apologies to my parents for causing a scene though I wasn't sure I had, and made my way to the exit. But just before I left, I caught one last glimpse of Graham. He was standing by the doors, talking to a few of the other guests, but his eyes met mine across the room. It wasn't much, just a glance. But it was enough to remind me that things had changed. I wasn't sure what that meant for the future, or what I was supposed to do with any of this. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finally starting to carve out a space for myself. And maybe, just maybe, things weren't as set in stone as I thought. As I left the reception hall, the cold night air hit me with a sense of finality. The kind of finality that only comes when something has shifted irrevocably, between me and my sister, between me and Graham, and maybe even within myself. The drive home was long and filled with too many thoughts. My parents had called me the outgoing one, the independent one, and I had always worn that label like a badge of honor. But tonight, I realized how much of that independence was built on trying to keep up with Brooke's perfection. I spent so many years trying to get noticed by people who already had their eyes on someone else. I never truly allowed myself to be enough in my own right. Until now. When I got home, the house felt different. Quieter than usual. It was a small place, my childhood home, with just enough space to remind me of how much I had left behind in search of something more. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, and took a deep breath. I should have felt relieved. But instead, I felt a strange emptiness. I had stood my ground. I had made my mark at Brooke's wedding in a way I never had before. But what did it mean? Was I finally seen, or was I just another casualty of my sister's perfect life? I didn't know the answer, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. The next few days dragged by slowly. I went to work, came home, tried to ignore the occasional calls from my mom asking if I was okay. The guilt over the confrontation with Brooke still lingered, even if I tried to tell myself I had done the right thing. But the guilt wasn't about the fight, it was about the aftermath. Brooke didn't call me. She didn't reach out. The silence between us felt like a weight, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to lift it. I told myself I didn't care about her validation anymore, but deep down, I did. She was my sister, after all. No matter how much she'd hurt me over the years, I still wanted her to see me. To see me for who I was, not just as the backup to her perfect life. Then, unexpectedly, I got a text from Graham. It was late one evening, and I almost didn't want to read it. It felt like an intrusion, but I opened it anyway. Carmen, I've been thinking about our conversation. I need to be honest with you. There's something I haven't told you yet, but I don't know how to say it. I can't shake the way I feel when I'm around you. I don't know what this means for either of us, but I don't want to ignore it anymore. Let's talk soon. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. I knew what he was saying. Or at least, I thought I did. He had feelings for me. He was confused, but he was being honest. And that honesty, it caught me off guard. Was he really serious? Could he be? I didn't know how to respond, or if I should. Part of me was tempted to just ignore him, pretend like it was just some passing moment of confusion that would fade with time. But the other part of me, the part that had felt something shift between us at the wedding, wasn't sure I could let this opportunity go without understanding it fully. I didn't respond that night. I wasn't ready to process what this meant for me, for Brooke, for anyone. The following week felt like a blur. I kept myself busy, but every time I was alone, I thought about the text. About Graham. About what had happened that night, about the strange energy that lingered between us. There was no denying it anymore, the way he'd looked at me, the way I'd felt in that moment. It had been more than a passing glance or a polite exchange. But what did it all mean? Was it just some fleeting attraction, or something deeper? Then, I saw her. Brooke was at the local coffee shop when I walked in one afternoon, sitting with some of her friends. She saw me immediately, her gaze sharp, and I braced myself for whatever was coming. She didn't approach me right away. Instead, she watched me from across the room. I tried not to meet her eyes, but I couldn't help it. I could feel the weight of her stare like a pressure on my chest. Finally, after a few moments of silence, she stood up and walked over to me. Her posture was stiff, like she was forcing herself to be civil. It wasn't that she was being warm, it was more like she was preparing herself for a confrontation. "I didn't think I'd see you here," she said, her voice strained but calm. I looked up from my coffee, unsure of what to say. I wasn't sure what she wanted. After everything, why would she want to talk to me now? "I'm not here to fight, Carmen," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. "But I need to know something." I raised an eyebrow. "What? Was it true? What happened at the wedding? Did you really think that I was just going to let you ruin everything?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and I saw the vulnerability behind her cold mask. For a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. "I didn't try to ruin anything," I said softly. "I was just trying to be myself. And I'm sorry if that bothered you. But I'm not sorry for being who I am. I've spent my whole life trying to be invisible, and I just couldn't do it anymore." There was a long pause between us, and for the first time in years, I saw Brooke as something other than my sister, the golden child. She was just a person, someone who had her own struggles, her own insecurities. I didn't know how much of it was her ego and how much was real, but in that moment, I felt a strange kind of compassion for her. "I'm not asking you to apologize," she finally said, her voice quieter now. I don't know what to do with all of this. With everything between us. I can't just pretend like things are fine." I nodded, not sure how to respond. "Maybe we both need some space. To figure things out. I don't know what happens next, Brooke. But I think we need to stop pretending like we've got it all figured out." She nodded, her eyes distant, like she wasn't really seeing me. "Maybe." Over the next few days, I kept thinking about that conversation. And about Graham's text. I had already decided I couldn't just let it slide. I needed closure, one way or another. So, I sent him a message. "Graham, I think we need to talk. Let me know when you're free." The reply came almost immediately. "I'll make time. When can you meet?" We agreed on a time, and I tried to push away the anxiety that gnawed at my stomach. This conversation could change everything. But maybe it already has. And I needed to know where it would go. The days leading up to our meeting were filled with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. I hadn't thought it through completely, what I wanted, what I was hoping to achieve, but I knew something had to change. I had to take control of the situation, not just for me, but for my future, my peace of mind. The time came, and I met Graham at a small cafe on the edge of town. The kind of place that was quiet enough for private conversations but still had a cozy ambience that made it feel like anything could happen. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nervously fidgeting with his coffee cup. As I walked in, he stood up, his face betraying the same nervous energy I felt. We exchanged a brief, awkward smile, and I sat down across from him. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, trying to mask the tension with a half-hearted attempt at casualness. "Of course," I replied, forcing myself to be calm even though my heart was pounding. "We need to talk." He nodded, visibly swallowing his nerves. "I know. I've been thinking about this conversation for days, and I'm not really sure how to start." I studied his face, wondering what he was about to say. But before I let him speak, I interrupted him, cutting straight to the point. "Graham, I don't know what you think this is, but I need to be clear with you. I'm not interested in being a part of this mess. You're engaged. You're about to marry my sister. And I'm not here to play the part of some confused lover or some romantic side story." He blinked, clearly taken aback. "Wait, that's not what let me finish," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I don't know what happened at the wedding. Maybe it was a momentary attraction. Maybe it was the tension, the weird energy between us. But whatever it was, I'm done with it." He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand, stopping him. You've already ruined enough, I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. You ruined my sister's wedding night, and in the process, you dragged me into your mess. Do you really think I want to deal with the fallout of this? Do you think I want to be the other woman? The one who shows up and upends everything? I've spent my entire life being invisible in my family, but I'm not willing to be someone's dirty little secret. Graham's face flushed with guilt, but he didn't say anything. He looked down at the table, clearly overwhelmed by everything I was saying. Here's the thing, I continued, my tone firm. I'm not here to make your life harder. You've already made your choice. You've chosen Brooke. And that's your prerogative. But don't expect me to keep letting you walk all over me. I'm done being the backup plan. Done being the one no one thinks twice about. His eyes met mine, finally holding my gaze. Carmen, I didn't want to hurt you. I'm so sorry about everything. I'm not interested in your apologies, I said, cutting him off. I'm interested in the truth. And the truth is, I'm not going to be the one who cleans up your mess. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. You need to end this engagement. Not because of me, but because you're clearly not ready for this. You're not ready for her. You're not ready for what you've promised. His lips parted as if he was about to argue, but he closed them again, as though he realized the truth in my words. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. I don't know if I can do that, Carmen, he admitted quietly. I don't know how to break it off with her. I don't want to hurt Brooke, and I've already messed everything up. I could see the conflict in his eyes, but I also saw something else, relief. He wasn't as trapped as he'd been pretending to be. He had the freedom to make a choice, even if it was difficult. You don't have to do it alone, I said, my voice gentler now. But you owe it to yourself, to her, and to me to end this now before it gets worse. It's not fair to anyone to live a lie. And Brooke deserves to know the truth. He looked down again, thinking. I could tell the weight of what I was asking wasn't easy to carry, but for the first time in a long time, I saw him actually consider it. He nodded slowly. You're right. I need to make it right. The next few days were a whirlwind. I didn't hear from Graham again immediately, but I saw a change in him. I knew he had to face the music. That was the first step. I focused on myself, tried to stay busy at work, and tried not to obsess over the outcome. The anticipation was gnawing at me, but I stayed patient. I couldn't control what Graham did next, but I could control my response. And then, it happened. Brooke called me. Her voice was shaky when she spoke, and I immediately knew something had changed. Carmen. I need to talk to you. I almost didn't want to. But I couldn't avoid it any longer. I agreed to meet her at a nearby park later that afternoon. When I got there, she was already sitting on a bench, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. What's going on? I asked, keeping my tone neutral, though my heart was racing. I don't even know where to begin, she said, her voice raw. Graham came to me. He told me everything. About the wedding, about how he felt, about the confusion, how he wasn't sure if he was making the right choice. My stomach twisted, but I stayed silent, letting her speak. And I told him I didn't want to be with someone who wasn't fully committed to me. I don't want to be in a marriage that starts with lies and deceit. I never thought it would be like this. But he was honest with me, and that's something I can't ignore. Her words hit me hard. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected her to actually walk away. But here she was, facing the truth head-on. The tension I had been carrying for so long began to ease. I'm not saying this is your fault, Carmen, she continued. But I guess, in some way, it was all inevitable. We've both been playing these roles for so long, and I guess it took something like this to make us realize how broken it all was. I looked at her, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to rub it in, wanted to throw it all back in her face. But instead, I just nodded. I'm sorry, Brooke. I didn't want any of this. But I had to do something. I couldn't keep letting myself fade into the background. She looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time in years, I saw something different in her eyes. Not judgment. Not envy. But something that almost resembled understanding. "I get it now," she whispered. "I really do." Over the following weeks, things slowly started to settle. Graham and Brooke broke off their engagement, and though it wasn't an easy decision, it felt like the right one. He took some time to reflect on everything, and I could tell he was genuinely trying to figure out what he wanted in life. As for me, I finally felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known before. I wasn't fighting for attention anymore, I wasn't trying to prove my worth to anyone. I was finally able to stand on my own, without being overshadowed by the expectations of my family. I never ended up with Graham, and in hindsight, I'm grateful for that. We weren't right for each other, and our brief connection was nothing more than a catalyst for change. But that's what life is sometimes, isn't it? A series of moments that shape who you are, who you become. As for my relationship with Brooke, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. We were learning how to be sisters again, in a way that wasn't built on jealousy, expectations, or competition. I had gotten what I wanted in the end, not revenge, but respect. And that was enough.